Hi poets, I'm Kaye Spivey. So in today's video I'm going to talk a little bit about publishing and my experience with publishing. This video was requested by Ellie from Earl Grey Books. Asked me to share some of my experiences with publishing because she is considering publishing a chapbook, which is so exciting. Congratulations, Ellie. I'll link her channel down below. I've briefly talked about my experience with publishing in two previous videos, in my Poetry's Place in the Literary Community video, as well as in my video Top 10 Tips for Poets. So those will both be linked down below as well as hopefully up here, and you can check those ones out. This one I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about publishing and how I got started. So I started publishing poetry pretty much out of high school, around about age 18. I did a whole bunch of research on it and I looked up and found the best way to start was pretty much universally suggested that you start off by publishing with literary magazines, sending out your poetry, not expecting to be paid, and getting a name for yourself. And so that's how I started. I sent out to a lot of different poetry magazines. I would look them up. Really great resources for that. If you have some money, Duotrope. Back when I started, Duotrope was a free service and now there is a subscription fee. They are fantastic. It is worth it. However, as I talked about in previous videos, I understand that most poets are dead broke, don't have money. So if you don't, another great resource is Poets and Writers magazine. It's just pw.org. I'll have that linked below as well. And they also are a great resource for finding literary magazines to submit to. So I submitted to a whole bunch of those. I submitted to, I think in my heyday I was sitting down and doing like 5 at a time every day or every couple of days. I'd recommend sitting down if you can do 10. What I would do would be open everything that looked appealing to me, that looked like it might be something that I was interested in sending to, something that published in my genre, my style, and then I would read through everyone's submissions. Sometimes they wouldn't be open for submissions. You do have to watch out, and usually you can filter so that only ones that are currently accepting are showing, which is fantastic. So I would go through, choose my top 5 or my top 10 places that I definitely had poems that I knew would be something they were interested in after researching on their page for a little bit, compile my poems into a single file and send them to them. And then it's a waiting game. It's a lot of rejection. If you're sending out, let's say you send out to 25 places, 24 of them are pretty much guaranteed to reject you. Even if it sounded like a good fit to you, it might just not be what they're looking for at the time. You're going to get rejections. Part of it is the high volume going out. Part of it is people are very particular in what they're interested in, what they're looking for. So you're going to get rejections. You're going to get a lot of rejections. Keep them all. Keep them all in a file. And when you have 100, pat yourself on the back. And hopefully by the time you have 100, you also have 2, 3, maybe 5 places that have accepted you. I've been accepted by several different journals. Usually just 1 or 2 pieces, sometimes more pieces. A really great one for me was publishing with my college's literary magazine, Northwest Boulevard. They've published me a couple of times, and part of it is they do publish students and alumni, and so that kind of had an in for me. But it's also something that's a really good ego booster to have somewhere that is publishing you and that you can show, that you can say, yes, I've been published by these people. Maybe they're my peers, but they appreciate what I am doing. I've been published by a couple places that don't exist anymore. Ghostlight magazine, I think, was one. Written River is still going. A couple different ones. And sometimes I kind of felt like maybe the poem wasn't a good fit for them, but that's what they loved. Sometimes you just don't know, so you get lucky. Also submit to contests. Usually you can find contests. Duotrope and Poets and Writers both have lists for contests as well, and that's where you start looking at hopefully winning some money. But as I've talked about, I probably won't talk about it too much. I talked about it in a previous video that if you're going for money in a contest, you're usually paying, which if you're starting out, try and avoid that. So I did a lot of submitting to contests, and then I did a lot of submitting a book. I tried compiling a book probably when I was about 19, 20. It was the first time I compiled, and I thought I was going with a book-length compilation. It was all the poems I had written up to that point. It was like 80 poems or something, and finally, after I had submitted it to maybe 2 contests, I sat down with a friend and she kind of went through and was like, alright, but what are you trying to say with all of these? Like, why do they go together? She gave me the best advice. This is my friend Marissa. She very, very kindly and very patiently sort of asked me what I wanted to say as a poet. And in my mind, every individual poem said something. And this is where you transition from submitting poems that you think is good for a journal to be just a piece, saying one thing, to transitioning over to completing a book-length collection or a chapbook-length collection. Chapbooks, I'm jumping all over the place, but chapbooks can be usually between 20 to 40 pages total. So it's just a few things, but they need to say something. They need to show your very best work. And each poem needs to stand alone, but they also have to fit together. So you have to figure out where the story is going. Sort of the same way that a poem needs to have an internal story and an internal structure and almost flow as though sentences are happening, even if your sentences are a little bit more chopped than they would be in prose or a little bit different. It needs to have a sentence structure internally. There needs to be a little bit of that going throughout the book as well. So when you're compiling poems, you really want to trim off anything that's not your best work. You only want to put forth poems where every time you read it, you're like, yes, something good is in this. You don't want to put in anything that you're like, I wrote it and it's okay. Never use those ones. Either sit down and spend more time with them until you feel like they're good, or chop them. Get rid of all of that. You want to only include the best things, and you want to include things that go together. And some of that is going to be figuring out what your theme or your message is. In my new book, Fragments, I tried a couple different things. One of the things I tried was splitting sections into muses. So each of the 7 muses, which annoyingly, like 3 of them are exactly the same thing worded slightly different that they represent, which is kind of irritating, which is probably why that didn't end up working for me. But I was trying to do a section for each muse. And I really worked on that quite a bit, trying to figure out, have almost even poems going throughout. That was the theme I was going for. That wasn't working. And I think that's something that you have to be aware of with yourself when you just realize it's not working. That's one of the things you have to work on going through your poetry book. What I ended up on was sections that almost were a sort of storytelling. The first section, stories, are complete narratives within themselves. Each poem tells a story. They're all fragments of stories of a thing happening. The next section is moments. It's a single photograph of a thing happening. The next one's silences, things happening quietly off to the side. I have sort of a story theme going, but then the poems within the sections, Lives is the last one, those are all, they fit into that theme. When it comes to chapbook length collection, like An Isolated Storm, they need to have a narrative running throughout. I just dropped it. Whew. One of the narratives within An Isolated Storm has to do with seasons. It runs through the seasons, and so where I was grouping the poems was poems that fit in a certain type of weather. There's a lot of rain poems together, there's summery poems together, there's wintry poems together, to try and create a mood that flows through. And one of the big breakthroughs with this one, when I sort of knew it was actually genuinely ready rather than just ready in my head, was when I decided to flip the poems. I initially had a lot of the maybe more lighthearted, happier poems. A lot of the very summery, the very springy poems were way at the back of the book, or were way at the front of the book, sorry. They were at the very front. I thought I was stepping off on the best foot. And then I realized a lot of collections I was reading, I really liked how the hopefulness grows throughout the collection. Starting with a very strong, but maybe not so hopeful poem, gives you somewhere to work from. And so I flipped the entire collection, almost transitioning colder and darker first, and then you ride out of it and you come to much happier poems and maybe a little less concrete poems get to be in the back. And I sort of ended up doing the same thing with Fragments because that is a style that I really like. I really like having kind of the heavier poems up front, and then as you go through, you want to be left with a good feeling. I think that's a reason people pick up books to begin with. You want to be left with some kind of a hopefulness or a happiness, or something needs to happen throughout that makes you want to go back and read it again. You need to be left with a good feeling. For both of my collections, that was something I really looked for, and in the end sort of settled on, is finding that good feeling within them. So once I was ready and I knew I had a good collection, and I read through it 3 or 4 times, sent it to different friends for my first chapbook, sent to several different friends, made sure that it sounded the way I wanted it to, that they weren't finding any gaps. Sometimes when you put poems together, you think they sound really good next to each other, but maybe there's not a lyrical transition, maybe there's not a theme transition that actually works, maybe there needs to be another poem in there, or maybe they need to not be touching. Maybe those poems need to be separated by some other poems that are already in there. Maybe they just don't belong together in that section. So having some friends help me with that and going through, I then started sending out, and I looked up a bunch of chapbook publishers because in my mind I was not going to self-publish. That was a big taboo. I'd read all kinds of things. Self-publishing wasn't going to work. For one thing, poetry is so hard to publish to begin with. It's so hard to sell to begin with, and I knew that going in, and I knew that I wasn't going to have sort of the selling power. I wasn't going to sort of know what to do. So I wasn't going to self-publish. Strongly against it. I think there's a huge stigma against self-publishing, and I wanted to be a legitimate poet. So I looked up a bunch of publishers, and I sent off to tons of chapbook publishers. Out of respect, I'm not going to get into exactly why I wouldn't go with them again, but I'm going to give you some tips. I have said those tips in my Tips for Poets video to some extent, but I'm going to talk about them more specifically right now. You need to make sure that any publisher you're going with has a social media presence. Otherwise, how are they going to get news out about you? Another thing that has been brought to my attention was a newsletter. If your publisher doesn't have a newsletter, then how are they going to tell anyone about you? One of the best places I published with was actually a short story I published with a group called For Book's Sake. They published my short story, The Bathtub, and they have a very prominent newsletter. They're based in England, so I based in America and I couldn't go, but they had a reading that anyone could attend of that collection when it was published. It was a fantastic collection. I'll actually link that down below if you want to check it out. One of my stories is in there and it's really exciting. So better places to publish will have a newsletter, they will have a strong social media presence. Make sure that their social media presence is stronger than yours. Make sure they have more Twitter followers. Whatever you need to look at, make sure that they've been doing this for a while. You need to kind of protect yourself, because the one thing that a publisher can do for you, other than actually do the publishing themselves, which a lot of places don't. I'm talking about places because most chapbook publishers are going to do print on demand because they know that they're not going to make money. They know that they aren't going to get their returns if they have a bunch of boxes of chapbooks sitting around. Feel free to refer to my Tips for Poets or my Poetry's Place in the Literary Community videos once again, because I do go into that a bit more. Those things are important because if a publisher can't get your name out there better than you can, and if you can use CreateSpace, or CreateSpace is the one that I use, there are many print-on-demand publishing companies. If you can use that, if you have a general knowledge of maybe Photoshop and how to format a Word document, and you have a significant Twitter following or social media presence, and you can get the word out there, maybe a publisher can't help you, basically, is what it comes down to. You've compiled your best work. You go into it knowing that you aren't going to make much money, or any money. Poetry doesn't sell at this time, unfortunately. And so what you want to avoid is handing out money to someone who isn't doing anything for you, who isn't actively promoting you. Please refer to my other video. Let me just sip my iced coffee on this one. Yum. It is iced coffee weather. That is so good. I would actually recommend, if you're looking into publishing a full-length collection, I'd say you can go the traditional route. You can keep sending out to publishers. Typically, if they like a full-length collection enough, they will promote it and publish it because it's worth it to them. Chapbook publishers, I would be very, very, very cautious of. I would go the self-publishing route, which is actually, when I very first started publishing poetry, when I very first started sending things out, that was the route that everyone said to go. Traditionally, you publish your own chapbook, you put together a collection, you print it on your computer and, you know, fold it and sew it yourself, because it's presenting yourself to the world. This is sort of your debutante moment. You're saying, I can complete a collection that works well together, that is beautiful, and I am giving it to you together. I have all these poems, and this is my best me. I want to be a poet, and I want to publish more. That's what that is saying. So I recommend, if you can do it, do create space. Get something out there, and then give it to all your friends and family. Give it to, I donated one of my chapbooks to my college library. They're happy to have things like that. They love to have an alumni's book. If you're going to high school, see if they'll take it. You can have your local library, if one of your friends can request it from your local library. Someone very graciously did that for me. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Rose. What you're trying to do is create something that you can hand to someone to represent your poetry to the best extent that it can be. I very strongly recommend CreateSpace. That is how I published these two collections. Ta-da! That's how I published both of my collections. I had initially been published by a small publisher. This version of An Isolated Storm was published by a small press publisher. I sort of discovered I could do all of that myself. I could make a much prettier cover. I'm not going to show you the back side of that cover because it's just black, but it has their logo, so I won't show it. But I could make a cover that represented me a lot better, that has the cherry blossoms leaking over, that has a nice matte finish where the poems are formatted in a way that I preferred. Formatting is very easy. Everything is online. They will tell you how to do it. CreateSpace tells you exactly how to format for the size of book you want. This one is a 6x9 book. This one is 5x8. I think I prefer the smaller size for a poetry book. I like the matte covers. I wasn't a fan of the glossy cover, it turned out. But it's not that hard to do. There are a lot of things you can just look up that are all online. You can figure out how to publish your own poetry book, and that is how I did both of them. Also, I've heard many people recommend that you then find someone to do your cover art. Although I strongly recommend that for all novelists, to get someone else to do your cover art. With poets, it depends. Are you creative? I painted this myself. Had a glass of wine and painted it because I was panicking about getting a cover done. I also did this cover completely myself. I did the paint in the background. Look at that. I am proud of it. And then I spent 4+ days doing this shit. Sorry. Doing this. Hi poets, I'm Kaye Spivey. You find someone who can do it for you. Understanding that the money you put into it will not come back to you. The poems that go into this book need to be a month or more old. Don't put new work in. I strongly recommend do not put new work into your book. It's too close to you. Too fresh and raw in your brain. You need to separate yourself from it, edit it yourself, edit it again yourself, revise it one more time, send it to 3 or 4 maybe, but at least 2 friends. Preferably at least one writer friend if you have them, and maybe one non-writer friend, because they're going to catch different things. Writers and readers catch different things, even if they overlap a little bit. Criticism. Revise and edit again 2 more times, at least maybe 6 more times. It depends. Once your book feels good, I'll check her on your computer, send it to one more friend, and revise that way. Or recommend someone edit your work and be a friend. It maybe be 2 to 3 friends would be best. Or you can pay an editor to do it. There are a lot fewer editors willing to do poetry. I don't know the politics of that exactly. They aren't out there. Anyone out there who is a poetry editor, let me know! But they're just not real. They're really hard to find. It won't come back to you. So if you have the money, do it. If you don't have the money, which a lot of poets do not have that money to spare, do what you can. You need to be editing it strongly yourself. Always putting your best foot forward. That is always the goal here, is to make sure that you're doing your very, very best work. Okay, I'll go ahead and talk about what I got out of both types of publishing really quick. I found doing the book completely myself less stressful. It was a lot less back and forth. I had a lot of control. One of the things that I really like is that I can track the sales myself. I know if I am making sales, I know if I need to put in more work. It's not about the money, but I do want to know if I'm selling anything, or if I need to be maybe looking into advertising or anything for a scam that's going to make you pay for your own books. They're asking you to pay for any copies of your own book. It's not an avenue to go down. Always offer you copies. Even if it's just like 10 copies for free for you, the author should get copies of their own book and not have to pay for them. Or publishing with like CreateSpace, they will let you have the book at cost to them. Just the cost of paying for them to put it together. They have published your poetry book. You do have to promote yourself. You have to promote yourself really hard. And I decided to go ahead and do a chapbook. Congratulations. If it's all together, congratulations. One of the best places I'm going to strongly recommend that you go ahead and go through is Goodreads. If you don't have a Goodreads account, what are you doing? Go get a Goodreads account and then find me and we can be friends on Goodreads. But fantastic. Go ahead and do one of their giveaways. If you can only afford to give away one collection, that's fine. Just give away one book, but Goodreads giveaways is a fantastic way. It's cost to you, but again, if you're doing it through CreateSpace like I have, then it might only be like $2 and then plus shipping to wherever you need to go. And it's a great way to promote your book. A lot of people go through there, they're going to see it, they might add it to their want to read shelves. Fantastic way to make sure that the audience that's looking for poetry books is seeing your book is out there. So highly recommend that. Obviously, tweet as much as you can. As on your Tumblr, take cute pictures of your book, put them up all over the internet. Do all of that because it is worth it to get your name out there. And briefly, I'll go into on CreateSpace. Your book for CreateSpace is not that hard. Other poetry books, look through them, see what kind of front and back matter they have. There's going to be a first page that only has the title of the book. Sometimes there's only a page that has the title and the author's name. It's more common to have both. Why not do both? You gotta do what you want. Next, you're going to want to have a copyright page and a dedication if you want. Table of contents. I had a lot on this one. I thought it looked better like this. You can make the table of contents look however you want. Afraid to let your book breathe. That's what this is. Having blank pages is okay. Professional books breathe. They have extra pages. They have blank space on the back. And you don't have to be afraid of that. It's perfectly fine to have blank pages. It makes the book seem more professional, to be perfectly honest. You're going to want to put acknowledgements if you've been working really hard and, oh, there's my face. If you've been working really hard and publishing other places and you put some of those collect poems into the book, make sure that you give a shout out, basically. It's a shout out to the people who have published you. It's polite. It's also expected that if you publish something that was previously published by another magazine, that's your work, that you sort of give them a shout out. In the back, stick your picture on it, say some cool things about yourself, put your website, make sure you put the right website, because for some reason I wrote .net on the back, even though it is .com, and it does say .com on the copyright page. I'm so sorry, it has been fixed now, it has. You need to make sure, and this is all online, this is all written down, really easy to find. I'll see about putting some links into the video. make sure that your numbers are on the outside. That's easy to fix. There are tutorials even on that. Make sure that on the left-hand side, if you're publishing Western style book, left-hand side is even number, right-hand side is odd number. That's pretty much universal. All out there for you to find. This is so easy. People have written lengthy things about this. Tons of people are talking about it. I know this is my video for talking about it, but if you need more help on the actual formatting and how things should look and how things are professional, grab a book off your shelf, open it up, and see what's in it. See what things look like. See what fonts people are using. When you're reading things, what looks good to you, what looks terrible. A lot of typical of books is aligned to the left-hand side of the page. Poetry does not tend to be centered. That's not a current thing that's happening. Tends to be aligned to the left side. Tends to be that the title is maybe slightly bigger, but sometimes just the same size and bolded. Those are common things in poems. Kind of go nuts. I mean, this is your thing. This is your collection, and I hope it turns out fantastic. It's kind of the summary of it. Those are the things that I learned. If you have any more specific questions, I will try and answer those down in the comments below. More specific advice for others, please include that. I could do with some more learning. I definitely am still figuring things out. I figured out a lot more things when I went ahead and published Fragments myself than I had when I was first trying and publishing An Isolated Storm. Learning curve, but it wasn't an impossible learning curve. I'm fairly good with computers. I figured it all out. I can Google, so not too hard. This will probably learn a lot more before publishing yet another book. But that helped you, Ellie, and anyone else watching, and poets, I will see you again. I think posting this video a little early this week because I wanted to get this up for you, and I'm going to publish something that I finally got completed for this Saturday. That is an old video, but I'm very passionate about that too. It's also going to be freakishly long. I'm sorry this one is so long. Guys, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you on Saturday. Bye!